And now back to your regular programming.
If you speak better to yourself.
You showed up for probably the dumbest conversation we've ever had on this show.
Let's have that smile again.
Tell me how that happens. Physically should not happen.
Relax.
If you say
Give me as well.
3 times a day, God will line it up.
He's just an absolute hack, and he gets his ass kicked by the teammates every week. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to Hack City. DeLeone and Sean Anderson. We're here to react to a pretty wild week 13 of college football. Before we jump in, Sean, can you share with our listeners a quick word from BetOnline?
Yeah, BetOnline, only place you want to be putting your sports wagers down. Am I taking a bath today? Did I have a bad day, a good day? Oh, we will be able to tell later on in the week, but all of my bet slips are going through BetOnline. Excited to see how they all shake out from the earliest odds to in-game live betting. BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. Joe was pitching me this previous weekend to bet on some volleyball at the bars, which was a very fun time. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here.
Well, it looks like Indiana's playoff hopes are completely done as they got rolled by Ohio State 38-15. A lot of sloppy mistakes, a lot of issues, a lot of errors played into a game where it felt like they were not even there. They had a really nice, strong drive where they scored to open the game, and then Ohio State started to just slowly chip away. There were a lot of bad special teams errors. There were a lot of bad protection errors that led to Indiana getting dominated as badly as they did on the road. The bigger talking point here is less about the performance and more about the playoff implications. What the heck do you do with Indiana after the way that they played on the road against the second best team in the country? I would argue, and I am sad to say this, but I think that they might be pushed out of the playoff conversation. I think what does help them, and we're going to end up getting to this, is that Ole Miss losing does give them a little bit of grace. But right now, Indiana is on the fringe. They're one of the last teams that are either going to be in or one of the first teams that is going to be out. You couldn't have showed up and played the way that you did, where you're getting completely outmuscled, outmanned, ran over on every single passing down. It just does not look good for an argument to say that this team is worthy and can put up a competitive performance in the playoff.
Yeah, Ohio State had a really good day. The pass rush that they were dialing up on third down was brilliant. Why not? Make a beat you in man coverage. They couldn't do that, and we're going to sack you 5 times. That was fantastic. Like seeing Caleb Downs' punt return. That's why you bring him to Ohio State. That's why you pay that man. He is an uber-talented player. I'd like to handle this cordially, though, Joe. Why are we leaving out a one-loss team that just lost to the national champs? Like that.
Okay, all right, stop. That last part was completely. No.
I said cordially. They're the clear and obvious favorite, and they look like the best team.
Cordially does not mean.
I'm trying to approach it cordially, and I'm letting you know.
Stop saying the word cordially. I don't know if you're whatever. They're not the national champs. I think that one thing we've been very clear and apparent in this season is that there's no clear favorite to win the national championship this year. I don't think Ohio State played a great football game and they kicked the crap out of them, but I still don't think that they are a completely clear and balanced team. I still think that their offensive line issues and injuries that they've suffered are going to catch up to them. So I don't think that's fair to throw out there that they're just de facto national champion because they beat Indiana in this game.
I'm not saying it's because they simply beat Indiana. The way that they did it was very impressive. One of the most dominant wins of the season.
Well, what game solidified it for you? The Nebraska game? Was that the one that you're like, oh, this one? Yep.
I'm saying this game today, dummy. This is what I'm telling you. This is the clear favorite. They are the clear favorite. Everyone else in the SEC goes in week after week and doesn't show me this kind of dominance.
Over Oregon, you think that the team that literally beat them is the clear favorite. That's your argument?
You've said it before that you don't want to give teams like this a second chance to play you because then they've already seen you and they can adjust and develop a better game plan.
They're down 2 offensive linemen. Oregon's defensive line is going to eat them up.
Ohio, but why are we knocking Indiana when this is an exceptional Ohio State team?
Okay, that's the better word, not national champion Ohio State. You're kicking them out.
They're clearly the favorite in my mind to win the national championship.
I don't agree with that, but I don't think it's wrong to kick them. I think Ole Miss's loss completely saves them and that they're still back into the mix here because Ole Miss is getting knocked out. A 3-loss Ole Miss team, the way that they played against Florida, should not get in with also a loss to Kentucky on their resume. But it's hard to make the argument in favor of Indiana when they played the back end of the Big 10. And this is the singular opportunity that they had to put up a fight, and they got smoked.
Did they just scrape by the back half of the Big Ten, or did they roll through them as they should, as a playoff team would?
I have been the biggest supporter of that argument coming into this game the entire season. So, like, before anyone wants to cast me as a non-Indiana supporter, I get that. But you can't lose by 23 points. And it's also how they lost. They looked lifeless, and they played so sloppy throughout the entirety of the game outside of the first drive that they had.
I'm not saying they did a lot of things wrong. They should have gotten Tyson Lawton the ball way more. He's way better than his usage rate in this game should have been. But Texas lost to Georgia by 15 points. They got drubbed and had to get just barely scraped back by to make that a somewhat reasonable score at the end of the game. Like we're going to act like this is the first like blowout loss between ranked teams this year. Well, I can't have that. They're a 1-loss team in the Big Ten. I can't sit here and say that we're throwing them out.
I'm not okay. Hold on. I'm not saying I'm completely removing them and throwing them out. I'm just saying that at the current moment, the argument that supports putting them in after a 23-point loss is now extremely shaky.
I'm saying they're a 1-loss Big Ten team, and it would be very, very suspect to not put them in when they have a good quarterback who didn't play great today, but Rourke's a good quarterback.
68 yards.
I know he had 68 yards. The man coverage was suffocating today. He could barely get the ball out because they were bringing 6 and 7, which they should have. Ohio State coached a better game. I'm going to say that also. First time in a while, I'm going to give some props to Ryan Day and his staff. They did what they needed to do in this game. They played bully ball and didn't let Indiana get rolling, and they were at home. I'm not saying that Indiana would have had another 7 points if they were at home, but you and I both have to realistically look at it. If this game was in Bloomington and those stands were as loud as they would have been in the hypothetical, it wouldn't have been Ohio Stadium gray sky bully action from Ohio State the entire game. It could have been a little bit different. I know we're playing a hypothetical game right now.
That's a big hypothetical to throw out there.
Yeah, at the same time, though, how many times do people talk about the SEC, talk about the night games, or if this was at our house, it would have been different?
I don't know if anyone's ever really classified Indiana's home stadium as
I would agree.
Very daunting road environment. But I think you're oversimplifying just saying, oh, they are a 1-loss Big Ten team. They just should get in. Like, I feel like that is it's just too oversimplifying of understanding what they've done this season, having watched that game and not seeing a competitive product being placed out there. This is likely Ohio State team that I don't think is going to be a seeded or a bye team in the playoff field. So if they're the 5th seeded team and Indiana's in the mix and they're not that far off, if that's how they play against a team that's only a few seeds above them, I wouldn't have a lot of faith that they're going to show up and play a competitive game. My biggest thing is that if they got matched up with Georgia, with Alabama, I think Tennessee now gets back into the playoff field, with Tennessee, with Texas. I did not see anything that they did today that tells me that they would play competitively and close.
I haven't seen much from the SEC this year that tells me that they have world beater teams that would absolutely run through Indiana. I just haven't. If we're eye testing it, I've seen a lot of sloppy play, bad coaching, and teams that don't take control of the
I think you're taking the Ole Miss performance out on Ole Miss, and just because Ole Miss played sloppy does not mean all these other teams are playing sloppy.
I have words for Ole Miss also, but this is a year where we saw Alabama lose to Vanderbilt. We've seen Kentucky get big wins in the SEC.
But Vanderbilt is a competitive, scrappy, quality team that's over 500 that would beat a majority of the teams in the Big Ten. That loss isn't as bad as everyone thought it was when it happened. Same thing with Alabama's close win over South Carolina. That looked horrible at the time, and at the current moment, that's a really good win. So we need to be able to revise the way that the season played out.
I'm fine with revising it, and my statement still stands, in my opinion, that I haven't seen true SEC dominance. There's not a big bad in that conference. We've seen the parity this year, and I think that having them with 4 in is fair. But if the whole discourse this week was real nasty about like the undeserving Indiana team that was 9-0, and we're trying to figure out what the 2 lost teams are and how they can work their way in the bubble. Like that all as the whole SEC narrative this week, I think we were a little knee jerk into projecting how it would shake out. And I'll say this, a lot of the conversations though were capped at, we'll see what happens between Ohio State and Indiana. So I'll be fair there and note that.
I would argue though, the reason why we can push for having 2 or 3 2-loss SEC teams into the playoff field is that when they're playing those games, they're playing them close. The quote underdog teams in those situations have pulled out upsets because there is still a more competitive range. However, when we created that same exact situation in the Big Ten, an undefeated Big Ten team against a 1-loss Big Ten team, the undefeated team got blown out. That situation has not occurred in the SEC. As much as we want to act like, yes, there's been sloppy play, I would argue that's competitive play. A bunch of teams that were good enough to beat one another, and we're seeing that play out onto the field. That, to me, places more evidence of, on a week-to-week basis, I know that an SEC team is going to come to play. I know an SEC team is going to be able to show up in a road environment and play a close football game, a competitive football game.
Was Georgia playing a close competitive football game when they lost by 18 to Ole Miss? That's not close or competitive. Does that loss look better now? It doesn't. The SEC is not as strong as we're making them out to be. Is it competitive? Yeah. And is the SEC parity there? Yeah. But at the same time, there's not somebody in this conference that I'm looking down the barrel and saying, we got to watch out for them any more than I am with Ohio State.
But this is where the conversation's getting lost. You're only looking for a premier team in the conference. This is one of the few times in SEC history that we have 4 really good teams that any of them could win the SEC if they got the chance to play in the SEC championship game. All 4 of those teams are good teams. They're all better than Indiana if they matched up with Indiana and played them on the field right now.
I think Tennessee would be a little closer than people would expect because they've been having some offensive woes. And I think Indiana's run defense showed some really bright spots today. And that's what they have going for themselves at Tennessee right now.
Did you say Indiana's run defense showed some bright spots?
Yeah, I thought they tackled well in the open field at times in the first half.
Is that the good job sticker that you earn for getting gashed by them? They got ran over by them.
I just said they had some good open field tackles in the first half. Or do you just tune out after the first 3 seconds of what I said?
No, I'm not tuning out what you're. I feel like that's a little bit of a pat on the head. All right, we're going too long on this one. Ole Miss dropped the game against Florida 24-17. This is the situation that I would feel strongly that Ole Miss should be out of the playoff field. Their resume, albeit they have a good win over Georgia, is extremely shaky. Quick thought on the game. Lane Kiffin does exactly what he does in these games where they've lost, where they should have pulled out a victory. Outcoached himself, could not get the run game going, could not find ways and avenues, and ironically waited until the very end of the game to try and rely on his run game and still set up Ole Miss into just really poor passing situations that allowed for Florida's edge rushers to tee off on Jackson Dart. 42 passing attempts is way too many that they even should have attempted in this game. But Ole Miss's current resume, it's a shit show. There should not be a 3-loss SEC team. If there is one that gets into the playoff, South Carolina has been more impressive than this Ole Miss team. What am I banking on as their best win? Beating LSU, smoking Arkansas, beating Oklahoma by 12 points. Understandably, they've got a great win over Georgia, as I mentioned at the lead into this segment. But I do not feel comfortable with the way that Ole Miss has played this year, and then this being the final nail in the coffin for them to get knocked out.
This is a total auto out, in my opinion, because we're talking about expectations for the playoffs. I have no expectations that Lane Kiffin is going to have this team ready in an even bigger game in the playoff. This is a game against Florida. And as Florida played a little better as of late, a little bit, they're competitive. They had a tough schedule. I don't know what they're going to do with Billy Napier after this hellish year that he's had with odd bright spots like this game. But today, Lane Kiffin showed us he played all the hits. He got too cute on 4th down. He could have kicked the field goal, running with a big defensive tackle, got stuffed. Jackson Dart looked like a Heisman candidate in the first half. Did not look as such, to put it nicely, in the second half with some brutal interceptions. Really didn't like what I saw from him down the stretch. It was stupid play calling. It was a big moment to really carry yourself into the discourse. Lights were somehow too bright in the early slot today for Lane, and he got it out of the way and saved us the breath that we're going to have to waste about thinking about whether they're going to be, what seed they're going to be. No, they're going to end up as like the 14th team, maybe 12. Sure, if you really want to bump them down that little, but they are not going to be in the CFP. I would hope that the committee realizes they don't have the mettle to play in the big ones or win the big ones. When no one's looking at them, Ole Miss can do some damage. When everyone has the magnifying glass and it's time to nut up, they disappear.
Well, actually, I mean, I'd partially argue it's somewhat of the inverse, because their two of their 3 losses are to Florida and to Kentucky. They did step up against Georgia, but they are not a team, though, as you said. I can't really truly trust them, especially that what was supposed to be their strength, their defensive line, getting run all over for 164 yards and Montrell Johnson completely popping off. Lane continues to fail to meet expectations. And I thought that after the Georgia win that they had rallied and they'd figured out some of their issues, and the LSU loss looked a little bit better and also wasn't too bad of a mark. But the way that LSU has played makes Ole Miss's performance against them called into question even greater. They are a mess of a team, and the direction of this team going forward after spending all this money in the offseason, it's a waste. It's a true disappointment, and it's a complete embarrassment on Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin's part.
And it's egg on our face a little bit, because we continue to get excited for them because Portal King is happening, and he's kind of online, and he chops it up with Feinbaum a little bit every year, and he's likable. Lane is likable, and the team, they can be exciting, and they got big wide receivers and big defensive linemen that can make plays, but they never really do anything. So maybe I'm fully rescinding my future 2025 momentum. I'm going to take a little mental clip of myself right now on November 23rd. So when it's July 23rd and we're already starting to talk about the SEC teams that we're excited for, I'll remember not to get excited about Ole Miss.
All right, we taped the first portion of this show in the beginning of the day. If you can't tell by Sean's turned around hat, that's a real big development that apparently happened.
Look, I just didn't know.
Took him 8 hours to turn his hat around.
I just didn't know folks were going to notice that maybe there was a different orientation of my lid.
Okay. Well, there's a different orientation on how the Big 12 and the SEC standings are going to look at the end of this week. We're having today's show mixing together the nut ass ending to Saturday's performances of week 13. I want to start us here with the Big 12. BYU and Arizona State's game played to the expectation of what we thought it was going to be for the most part. I thought that Arizona State was going to be able to run the ball effectively enough early in the game, especially to outperform BYU. BYU scrapes back. There's the whole cluster F is the word I was looking for, of the fans coming onto the field and having to leave the field and then coming back onto the field after BYU was given an extra second of time. Colorado's loss to Kansas, I think, was the most unexpected. And this is what really complicates the expectations for what's happening with the Big 12. Colorado gets smoked. They're effectively out of the Big 12 playoff conversation from the way that things currently look. Iowa State reclaims a spot above them, the way that the standings appear right now on ESPN. I think we're trending towards a rematch between Arizona State and BYU in the Big 12 championship game. My biggest thing with all this is that we're only going to get one Big 12 team in. It's something that I've mentioned before. It's something that's not original. It's not hot takey. The Big 12 has been one of the weaker conferences. It has had a lot of really bad teams in it. It's devoid mostly of premier NFL talent, except for some of the top teams. And Arizona State looks like it's the best representative based on the way that they played against BYU for the first 3 quarters before they let BYU climb back into it.
Yeah, this conference is frustrating because I'm typically a Big 12 apologist. I like the fun brand of football. I like that it's exciting, but this year they're down, and they're just visibly down when you watch their games. The resumes aren't that strong. Kansas State, I thought, fumbled a huge opportunity to run away with this conference mid to end of the season. Colorado, I thought, was coming into form, and then they let Devin Neal run for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns on them. And Arizona State, I guess, has started surging, and I can get behind an offense with Cam Scatterbo. He's legit, and he's fun, and he's exciting, and I think he is a difference maker. But the rotating wheel of this conference has been frustrating because all we want to do was see like one after like week 3. We're like, okay, there's going to be one. I just want to see one set themselves apart, and they haven't. And it's kind of just been interweaved mediocrity from all the teams that you're like, okay, give me something to rally behind. Cause I know you like to rally behind a Big 12 team if they start being fun and exciting, but we don't have that. Well, and it's just going to become boring numbers and seeding to close this thing out.
I don't mean to jump in on you, but Colorado was that team. And that's what's like bothering me the most about this week is that there's obviously the difficult relationship of covering Colorado this season. If you're not like a true, just pure Colorado fan, Deion Sanders fan. We were in early on Deion Sanders when he took over at Jackson State. This show, its antithesis was FCS football. And we were big supporters of it. Even when we thought Warren Sapp was going to be on the original coaching staff for Deion Sanders, like we were super juiced up by it. And the way that they have been able to rally this year really allowed for me to buy back in. And I really thought that they were going to be too athletic for Kansas's defense to keep up with. Their defense has been very shaky. They played their best game all season. They did not play a lick of good run defense in this game, which is why they got completely stomped out by Devin Neal, who ran for 207 yards on 37 carries and 3 touchdowns. That to me is ultimately what is so frustrating because like they were a fun story. They had 2 of the best players in the country on their team, which is insane to say that they're not even going to be in the playoff conversation. I hope this doesn't hurt Travis Hunter's playoff chances or Heisman chances, which it shouldn't. But they also were playing a brand of football that was exciting, where they could put up points really quickly. This was the first time this year, except for the Nebraska game early on in the season, that was non-existent. I really hate that we actually had the opportunity to have like a really fun playoff convo and the chaotic nature of what would have happened with that fan base if they got the chance to play and the commentary, the conversations around the matchup that they would have had in the playoff field. But instead, we're kind of screwed out of that. I'm rooting for Arizona State because I like Kenny Dillingham and I like Cam Scatterbo, but I feel like I'm a little bit robbed of what could have been such a really freaking rambunctious and entertaining end to the season.
This Kansas team was 2-6 and rattled off wins against Iowa State when they were 17, BYU when they were 6, and Colorado when they were 16. What is that? Why?
Yeah.
Why? I guess Leipold is just that dude and keeps a dead on arrival team committed and wants them to play hard football all throughout the season. Like at some point, I'm going to have to tip my cap to it. I'm frustrated because that was salient about Colorado. Like the Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter experience, I could get that every week and be excited and happy about it. But they are flawed. The Buffs, they do have problems. Their run game this year has been so inconsistent, and they got outrushed so bad today. 331-42. Unacceptable. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That is disgusting. And it's just, it stinks because it's like you got a baseball team with a guy that hits 50 home runs and they have 65 wins. That's what it feels like.
Travis Hunter's quite literally Shohei Ohtani because there's always that running gag of, the one tweet that was out there a few years ago where it was like, Shohei Ohtani did something that hadn't been done before since Tungsten Arm McGee in 1902, and the Angels lost 12-5. And he does so much, and he did so much for the performance of this game. And Deion Sanders after the game said, "None of you played your best game." Travis Hunter played his best game. Travis Hunter did everything that he possibly could have to keep them in this football game. But the rest of the team, I think that they all were just looking into the success of Like Shedeur Sanders also played a phenomenal game. He's
Yeah.
23 of 29. I didn't even see a stat
3
line.
touchdowns. He had a really good game.
Travis Hunter, 8 for 125 and 2 scores. Like they both played out of their minds, and it does feel like the only two guys who were locked in, and everyone else was just looking ahead to that Big 12 championship game and reading all the headlines.
So dumb. I think Dion said you guys were intoxicated by your success.
Yeah.
What a bar. And I guess it's true. You have the pulse, and if that's how they look like they played, like they could just end up getting by because Travis Hunter did something I so rarely see, made a screen pass work. Not only got a first down, but a touchdown off of it. I hate screen passes, and he's good enough to get one in the end zone with it. Disappointing for Colorado because I don't know. In September, we're kind of like, is this whole thing going to work? The Nebraska loss was so just shitty that you're like, is this going to be the same thing as last year? And no, they started rattling off wins, and you're like, all right, we're finally in it. We're in the thick of it. Dion actually has got this team rolling, and now it's just kind of it's derailed, and now it's going to be, I guess, yelling ass Kenny Dillingham, who has had 2 meltdowns.
I like Kenny Dillingham the way that he was getting approached by the officials and then the police with a group of Arizona State students behind him, hyping him up, holding their phones out. Like it looked like Kenny Dillingham got thrown out of a bar and all of his boys were standing behind him and he's just yelling at the bouncer.
Yeah.
Like, who do you think you are? Throw me out of this bar, man. Who do you think you are? Tell me what to do. And all of his boys are just standing by going,
Yeah, but his boys are the reason that he got kicked out.
Right,
They're the one that spilled the beer on the bartender.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
He's sitting out there like, well, I guess now I'm angry because I wanted to stay in the bar.
Well, and that's the best, right? It's the best part is that Kenny Dillingham's just purely playing off the vibes of just being. So it's like I'm going to rally around these thousands of fans that just wanted to come be on the field with me.
Here's the thing.
He's one of the dudes, man. I love that about him.
I like the field storming, and I think some of the big fines are egregious. You should get double the fine if you pull the goalpost down before 0:00 on the clock. That should be an immediate rule. You can't have no goalposts to stop a play.
I was at a bar watching the Notre Dame game with my dad, and he was total old man move. He's like, they should give the ball back to the opposing team on the 25-yard line, and they should get to kick a field goal. And I'm like, what? You can't end a game like that. He's like, it's got no place in the game. I'm like, yeah, that's an old man take. That's not happening. It's part of the sport. It's part of what makes the sport unique.
God, good. Thank God you weren't with him when you saw the Oklahoma one. Jeez.
Yeah, what a take. Speaking of Oklahoma, 24-3 victory over Alabama, and then we just witnessed Texas A&M blunder it away in overtime, 43-41. The playoff implications now in the SEC are even messier. And we had a heated exchange at the beginning of this episode, and it's kind of, I mean, this is interesting for the listener to tune into, because what I was lost in us yelling at each other and what I tweeted out that I think is extremely relevant with what happened with the SEC today, with 3 of its teams losing, now having 3 losses, playing themselves out of the mix. I'm looking at this right now. There's 3 teams. There's 3 SEC teams right now that should get into the playoff. Tennessee, Georgia, Texas. And even if Texas theoretically loses and they have 2 losses, they should still get in. Texas A&M with 3 losses, South Carolina with 3 losses, Alabama with 3 losses, Missouri with 3 losses, Ole Miss with 3 losses. None of them should get into the playoff field. There should not be a 3-loss team in the playoff field unless you absolutely must, and their singular loss, or not singular, their 3 losses are to top-ranked teams. All 3 losses should be against top 25 ranked teams at the end of the season, not when they played them, at the end of the season. But this plays into what I should have led the argument I was having with you earlier, is that I do not think that there is a right answer of who belongs in the playoff field, because the arguments that were made to support why SEC teams deserve to have 5 in last week changed on a dime based on the results that happened today. And the same thing goes for the performance by Indiana. The performance by Indiana changed within minutes of the outcome of the Ole Miss game. There is no right answer. The playoff field is expanded to make the outcomes of these games far more stressful and exciting, which I love. But the problem is there's too many people out there speaking in such finite, confirmed outcomes, saying that, no, this team is confirmed. Like the whole Tennessee versus Indiana argument this week. Tennessee would kick the shit out of Indiana. You don't know that. You don't know that. That's the problem.
There's outside of like the obvious Oregon, Ohio State, Big 12 winner, I guess. They Miami and then the G5. It's just a mix. And I guess Penn State, sure, but Penn State almost dropped it today. They almost sell themselves out of the playoff picture, River, almost losing to Minnesota. Embarrassing. So I'm not envious of those that are going to have to actually make the decisions on like the remaining 4 to 5, because that's going to be just judgment calls. Everyone's got wins against everyone. Everyone's got a goofy loss, except for Oregon and Ohio State. So go ahead. Eat each other alive in that meeting room. Take 10 hours. It take 12 hours. It doesn't matter. You're not going to make anybody happy, except for those of us that I guess don't, the lucky privileged few like myself that don't have a team that just are watching the sport for the chaos and the fun. I think those are going to be the real winners of this CFP. The majority are going to be very angry. I am excited to see the ludicrous grandstanding for Alabama that is going to come on the media cycle.
That doesn't happen.
It is going to be insane. I thought that I had seen the lowest point where Nick Saban was groveling during a halftime of some big matchup where he was still pitching that Alabama should get in. I thought that was the lowest of the low. Folks, buckle up. You're going to see some pretty incredible stuff coming out of that media camp. A lot of the strength of schedule. Can you believe this? The home versus aways. The Vandy's way better than we thought they were. Look at their acceptance rate. It's an elite institution. We're going to see a lot of really entertaining stuff trying to get them in. And that's just Alabama. You don't think South Carolina is going to be loud? Talk about their 8-3.
Well, because they actually have a pretty good resume, but it doesn't matter. They still
lost to Alabama. Barely.
Actually, the craziest thing, wait a minute. So their 3 losses are to, actually, now that I say it out loud, South Carolina is the only 3-loss team that actually has an argument because it fits into what I just said a second ago. You have to have your 3 losses be against ranked teams. Their 3 losses are LSU, Alabama, and Ole Miss. They're the only team that I comfortably would put it. But then the problem is now, wait, hold on. The problem is now is that Alabama beat South Carolina.
Yeah.
And Ole Miss beat South Carolina. So what the shit am I supposed to do with that? Look,
Ole Miss beat South Carolina by 24.
But so, okay, we were getting into, or I was getting into, well, you were being an ass. We were getting an argument with Ryan. I was getting into an argument with Ryan Roberts, friend of the show, because he's very anti-SEC. And I am pro good teams getting into the playoff, which to his opinion thinks I'm saying that I am pro SEC. And I just would like to point out, as what we were talking about with Ryan, and I think he doesn't think I agree with this. There should not be a 3-loss team in there. That's all I keep coming back down to. There's no 3-loss SEC team that looks good enough to deserve to be in there because all these teams have messy losses. Because you do bring up the good point. The South Carolina loss to Ole Miss, they got smoked.
Yeah.
So that's not really like a great loss. They got their asses handed to them.
The Alabama loss was great. That was close, and I think they really could have and should have won that game. But then we're playing the could have and should have game, which is the last place you want to be when you're making the big time decisions, is the could have, should have. Yeah. It's what did they actually do? What did they not do? Like there has to be some binary when they're actually weighing it out. As an eye test guy, I could still agree that the numbers have to matter. The games win-loss, they have to matter, or else we're just playing fiddlesticks until the last 2 weeks of the season and we're seeing who looks best. No, it's a full goddamn season. Every game should matter.
Here's so before we close out here, here's my just random pitch it projection of who gets in. We have, assuming Boise State wins out, they get in. Barf. I think now the door is opened for great. Blake just quote tweeted me about how I tweeted that there should only be one SEC team in the playoff, and he quote tweeted me saying that Notre Dame shouldn't get in. Yeah, that's the reaction.
Now you're going to go resume for resume with
them. Yeah. I'm going to ask him how Bryce Underwood's doing. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not that mean. Blake, I love you. ACC, I think now we have room for two to Clemson might actually move up into this conversation. But I think realistically, it's going to be because you don't have a bad resume. SMU and Miami are going to be the two ACC representatives based on the outcome of that game, because realistically, you're going to have a 2-loss ACC team and they're 1 loss. As long as it's a close ACC championship game loss, they're still in the mix. 1 Big 12 team, let's just throw out there, let's say it's Arizona State. 4 Big 10 teams right now we're trending towards. So wait, what are we up to now? It's 2, 3, 4. So 4, that gets us up to 8 teams. Oregon, Indiana is saved by the SEC meltdown, Ohio State and Penn State. So we're up to 8 teams. And then
you go 4 SECs?
Well, no, because as I mentioned earlier, there's only 3 SEC teams that have.
There can't be 3
only 2 losses.
You can't throw Clemson in this mix.
Holy shit! The craziest part about all this, here.
Absolutely, Bill.
Here's the nauseating possibility here. That final team that gets in, because I assume Texas, Georgia, Tennessee all get in. It's either going to be South Carolina. If Texas A&M theoretically beats Texas and that throws things into a total confusing state, maybe they're that final team, or it's Clemson, or it's Tulane.
Oh my God.
We have 2 G5 teams in.
I said 2 G5s in August and got mocked out. But look, the Clemson South Carolina game.
Stupid. They should not be 2.
Maybe there should. The Clemson South Carolina game this next week is going to determine that last spot.
Right.
That's what it would have to be, unless there's more meltdown. And now I'm jinxing the meltdown. Jesus, that's the game of the year. Clemson versus freaking stupid South Carolina. Gross.
I can't believe that. Who would have thought that would be the most important implications? Let us know in the comments below what you think about the playoff field. At Joe DeLeone, at Sanderson Radio, and at Hack City Pod. We'll talk to you folks later.